Henry Bonsu on Times Radio.
Right, now, after reportedly discussing ways to oust Keir Starmer from office, Elon Musk is now weighing in on the German general election, declaring far-right leader Alice Weidel the leading candidate. In a live-streamed interview earlier today on his platform X, the billionaire quizzed Weidel on the burdens of German business rules and how the woke mind virus, as he calls it, has infected their education system. Let's take a listen to their exchange on freedom of speech.
Now, while we talk, 150 bureaucrats of the European Union are watching us, our conversation, to enforce this ridiculous Digital Services Act that is nothing else than a censorship on free speech. And you said it, free speech is a precondition of democracy.
Yeah, without freedom of speech, people are obviously not able to say what they want to say, and they cannot make an informed vote. It's actually quite easy to tell who the bad guys are. It's like, who wants to shut down freedom of speech? They are the bad guys.
So that was Elon Musk in conversation with the leader of the Alternative for Deutschland, Alice Weidel. So for tonight's debate, I've been joined by Edward Lucas, Senior Fellow at the Centre for European Policy Analysis, and Andrew Eborn, Futurist broadcaster and President of Octopus TV, to discuss whether Musk has taken its interference in European politics a step too far. Edward began by telling me what he made of Musk's live stream.
It was a car crash, really, I thought. I mean, among the highlights were Alice Weidel saying that the point about Hitler was that he was a communist, and therefore it was quite unfair to compare her right-wing party with the Nazis, leaving out the fact that Hitler and the Nazis were kind of genocidal thugs. It was also quite amusing that Elon Musk got her name wrong, called her Weidel at the beginning. They had a very meandering discussion about the meaning of life and belief in God, which included a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But it was almost like it wouldn't have been out of place on a satirical programme, really. I mean, imagine it on Little Britain. And I think that Musk may be the richest person in the world, but he's certainly not the smartest when it comes both to his ideas and his ways of getting them across.
In that case, Edward, do those senior European politicians, both at Chancellor and presidential level, are they getting a little bit hysterical when they say we need to rein this man in? He's directly attempting to influence things at a national level and perhaps across the EU in a rightward populist direction.
I think it's certainly right to be concerned because he's very rich, and if he starts giving $1 million here or 100 million there to parties in other countries, that will give them a bit of an edge, although I think it will also create some negatives as well. And it's kind of Marmite, really. I think if you live in this sort of right-wing, conspiracy-minded sort of parallel universe, that's the kind of thing you like, and it will heat people up. And for a lot of people outside that universe will think these people are kind of mad and silly and actually quite horrible. And so it may create a sort of counter-reaction on the other side. And I don't think it's very good for democracy if we live our lives in these sort of strange echo chambers. And so I worry about that. In a way, Musk's success and the fact he actually owns one of these echo chambers is a kind of symptom of a broader problem, I think.
Andrew,
yes.
What do you make of this development, particularly given that the Times has been reporting today that Elon Musk has had conversations with, we don't know whom, about removing Keir Starmer before the next general election?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I have the joy, it's lovely to join you, yes. I have to say. I have the joy of having Errol Musk, Elon's father, on my show, The Andrew Eborn Show, every day.
Yes.
And we talk about this and the influence that Errol and Elon have around the world. He's got over 211 million people following him on Twitter.
So he says.
Oh, well.
We don't know how many of those are real people.
Absolutely. You look at the figures. But Edward is a perfect example of why it's okay, because he's come on here today and say that he listened to them and he thought it was a complete farce. So the whole idea is we want to shine a spotlight on the debate. Without doubt, Elon is probably the most influential person in the world. Without doubt, he helped Trump win the election, as I predicted. And without doubt, he wants to have an interest in politics. The sense of humour and his tweets actually come about, and I discussed this with Errol just in the last few hours.
Yes.
It comes as a result of his love, if you like, of British comedy. He grew up on Monty Python and that sort of stuff. So when you're talking about Little Britain, that's his language and so on and so forth. But people, and I think Edward's a perfect example of this, you turn around, if you give the electorate the chance to make up their own minds, that's what you're doing. So all he's doing is shining a spotlight on different areas. And you talk about what's happening, the influence he's having over here in the UK election. He loved Nigel a few weeks ago.
As a Mr. Farage.
Yes, Nigel Farage. He sort of turned around and said, OK, he may or may not, it's never been confirmed, 100 million donation. Well, the last few days, he's turned around and said, well, Nigel's not really fit to be the leader. And a lot of that's to do with Tommy Robinson, his views on that and so on and so forth. The reality is he's an ordinary person who's entitled to an opinion.
But he's trying to pick our leaders for us, decide who we should vote for, who we should be influenced by, and some of the misinformation that the Digital Services Act, put through by the EU a couple of years ago, it's supposed to prevent or protect people from really misleading and sometimes outright false stuff.
And without a doubt, that's got to be right. And you've got to look at, and background as a lawyer, as you know. So the mischief of the Act is to make sure that people are not misled. You're not influencing people in a bad way, illegitimate influence, and there's strange language about that sort of stuff. But Edward is the perfect example of that, because he's turned out, he listened to the interview.
You've got to stop saying this, it's embarrassing. Can't be the perfect example more than once.
The reason you're the perfect example is that all that Elon said is have a conversation. And what you've done, you said, it was a rubbish conversation. I think you're dismissing the intelligence of the electorate if you turn around and think that people are going to be unduly influenced as a result of it.
OK, Edward, back to you.
When I was a candidate in the last election, I went door-knocking quite a lot, and I was very struck by how many people live down this rabbit hole and believe nonsense of all sorts, that the pandemic was a plandemic, for example, that vaccines give kids cancer, that we are being run by secret cabals of Jews and Freemasons and so on. So I think that it has a toxic effect, and one tries in the sort of political and media mainstream to counter it. But I was just looking at something that Musk has just retweeted. I guess you may have heard of Alex Jones, the sort of disgraced
Mr.
proprietor of InfoWars. And he tweeted just about the fires in Los Angeles, destroyed by design. Los Angeles fires are part of a larger globalist plot to wage economic warfare and deindustrialize the United States. And Musk just retweets this with the word true. Now, I don't think that's very helpful. I think there's another problem, which is that to some extent X, formerly Twitter, is the sort of public square. And if you can be retweeted or re-X'd by Musk and you're a super user, that's directly money in your pocket. So he's sort of commercialized what used to be a kind of neutral in public forum and made it into a space where being mad and silly makes you more money.
If that's where things are going, what should the likes of the EU be doing about it? After all, these are nation states. They do have a fair degree of latitude in this. They've passed an act which it would appear that Musk is able to just cock a snook at. And people are saying that certainly at the MEP level, we've got to do better. The European Commission has to do something. What do you think it should do?
You've put your finger, I think, on what will be one of the great questions of the coming year, which is that the American tech giants loathe the attempts by the European Commission and other governments, including this one, to impose rules on copyright, particularly the use of material for training AI large language models, on privacy and the whole idea of individual data privacy, which doesn't really exist in the United States, and countering monopoly, which is an area where the EU's played a very big role. And they're pushing back hard on that. And I think that we may see under the Trump administration push from America saying, we won't defend you unless you let our tech companies do what they want. And that's going to be very serious. We've already seen digital issues move into the trade space, which is quite new. And we used to have trade arguments about kind of chlorine-washed chicken and cheese and things like that. And now it's kind of treat our digital companies the way they want to be treated. Otherwise, we won't give you what you want and other things. And that's already bad enough. But once digital regulation comes into national security, then we're, I think, in a whole new era. I love the First Amendment. I wish we had the First Amendment in this country, because it would prevent rich people trying to nobble journalists like me for saying inconvenient truths. But the First Amendment's been kind of weaponized in the hands of the digital tech giants to mean we don't have to police our content at all. We can do whatever we want, and you don't have a say. And I think that's quite troubling. I would say get your popcorn and watch out for an almighty bust-up between the Trump administration, the European Commission, in which this is going to be a very big issue.
Andrew, like Elon Musk, you're a futurist. You believe in free speech as well, passionately,
absolutely.
clearly. Where do you think this is all going? Bearing in mind we've had race riots in this country last year based on false information. We've now got a minister having to increase her security because Elon Musk has said false things about her. He's trying to drive our Prime Minister out of office. Is this the shape of things to come?
Well, I think the reality is this, is that absolutely we must have freedom of speech, but freedom of speech doesn't come, it's not freedom from consequences. So you need to have a law in place which deals with defamation and the spread of misleading information which could lead to incitement for violence. So without a doubt, that needs to be right. What's now happened, and Zuckerberg has followed the lead, as you know, he's announced in the last few hours.
He's kissed the ring. The Trump ring.
Exactly. He sort of turned around and said, actually, we're going to police this. It's not about misinformation. The community will decide. And I go back to the central point about this, is that if people who are saying that you shouldn't give these people a platform are working on the basis that the electorate is stupid. Now, they're not stupid. People are very wise. And I always say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. What you need to do is give people the information, let them make informed decisions. And that's what's happening. So,
but a few people with community notes who might have a combined number of followers, say, in the low tens of thousands. How can they come up against somebody who's got 200 million followers?
No, I'll tell you what happens, and these are the rules, just to clarify about community notes. The way that it works is that people who would normally disagree would agree that this is the right community note. So what's going to happen is you're saying it to the public. So it's expensive, first of all, to police every tweet and so on and so forth. So what's now happening is to say, we'll open it up to the community. But I do think we need to have a platform where you're shining a spotlight on this stuff. And we've had a number of scandals, a number of moral stains on society. We talk about grooming gangs, which is a euphemism, the rape gangs and the horrendous reports. Elon Musk has done tremendous work in shining a spotlight on those.
Tremendous work, Edward. Tremendous work.
I mean, I think it's very odd. The Private Eye pointed out this week, this has been one of the most heavily covered stories in the British media, and actually very heavily covered in the American media, starting off in 2008, and Andrew Norfolk won the Orwell Prize for his work in uncovering this. So the idea that this is some kind of secret that only the brave Elon Musk has exposed is nonsense.
No, but nobody said only the brave Elon Musk. Nobody's saying only the brave.
Go on, Edward. Today is he's created a social media platform which creates echo chambers, and he's now stuck in an echo chamber where he's getting very odd information from a small number of sort of right-wing libertarian British fringe people, and he then amplifies this with his 100 million or so followers, some of whom I suspect are probably Russian and Chinese bots, not real people. But I think it does have a bad effect, and it's too easy just to say, oh, trust the electorate, they're clever. We actually have laws in this country that prevent people saying things that we think are socially damaging. For example, contempt of court laws. That's why Tommy Robinson's in jail. He nearly destroyed a rape trial by doing what in American terms is free speech, but it's not a free speech of a kind we want. We want to protect our jury system, and so on and so forth. So I think it's too easy just to sit back and say, oh, well, sunlight's the best disinfectant and truth will rise to the top, because the experience shows it doesn't.
Okay, Andrew, to finish?
Well, I think to finish, and thank you for the last word, I love it. The reality is this, that if you're in favour of free speech, there's no way you should be shutting this up. The idea is, I believe, and I have a lot of trust in the electorate, the brilliant listeners that we have on Times Radio are intelligent. What I like is that you give them the information, they will make informed decisions. And if you hide things away, that's the problem. And that's why people come up with all these wonderful theories and so on and so forth. Truth does not mind being questioned. A lie doesn't like being challenged. That's what I would say.
That's Andrew Eborn, a futurist, broadcaster and president of Octopus TV, and Edward Lucas, senior fellow at the Centre for European Policy Analysis. Henry Bonsu on Times Radio.
Henry Bonsu on Times Radio.